Have you ever wondered what really goes on behind the scenes at a crime scene? Why does it take so long to process the scene, and why does the body stay outside for that whole time? A lot of TV shows try to portray what goes on, but they don't necessarily get it right. I'm Shannon Johnson, Director of the Crime Lab, and I'm here today to show you what really happens at a crime scene. It's hard to see from back here what's happening over there, so we're hoping that we can clear up some of those misconceptions, answer those questions, and take you over and give you a view of what really happens. So let me take you under the tape today and show you what the MPD Crime Lab does when they're processing a crime scene.
Welcome, my name is Mark Ulrich and I'm a supervisor of forensic science within the MPD Crime Lab unit. What we have set up for you here today is a mock outdoor crime scene representing a victim of a gunshot wound who was found dead on arrival at the scene. What we have set up for you and what you see here represents a crime scene that has already been searched with evidence identified and marked out. This represents a scene that has already, since the time we've gotten here, taken maybe 15 minutes to multiple hours to set up.
We understand that after a crime takes place, emotions can run high for loved ones of victims, along with those that live in the area. Minutes can feel like hours and hours like days, but we must be thorough and follow specific protocols to not only find who is responsible, but also build a case that will hold up in the court of law. Our main goal is always justice.
After the scene has been documented with notes and the scene has been searched, markers have been placed, we'll go back and document it through photographs, and this will be done at every scene. How we typically start it is we'll work out and work our way in.
The photographer will get photos that establish the location, overall photos of the scene from 4 to 8 perspectives, mid-range photographs offering perspective of evidence markers, close-ups of all evidence, and multiple angles and close-ups of victims if there are any on scene.
It's scene specific, depending on what it is. It could take up to 15 minutes up to an hour, perhaps even longer. Our main purpose is to document everything we can, so we might take up to nearly up to 200 photographs.
In critical incidences or homicides, the crime lab will also video the scene.
What we want to do is we want to show the location of the scene, and we want to start with an overall view of the incident, what's going on. And then we want to move to a mid-range video and show the evidence within the scene itself. And then we finish up with close-ups of the evidence placards to show what each piece of evidence is. And the point of that is we just want to show, without people in the scene, kind of what's going on, and it's easier to view than an individual photograph. So it just gives a nice overall view of the scene.
The last step when documenting a scene is creating a crime scene sketch.
So the purpose of sketching the scene is to show all the evidence in relation to a geographic location, such as a building, street sign, anything that kind of help us pinpoint the scene. Basically, we want to show the spatial representation of all the evidence within the scene. We want to show this for the court so the jury kind of understands what the scene was like.
After the scene is documented, all evidence will be processed and collected.
Frequently we get asked why it seems like individuals aren't doing much at the scene. What we've kind of represented here with the documentation and collection and processing of evidence is show that everything is done sequentially. Everything has to be done a step at a time, meaning the photography is done separately, video done separately, and then the sketching, then the evidence processing and collection. Every scene is essentially different at the heart of it, and each scene can take a different amount of time. We recently had a scene that took over 9 hours to search for evidence, mark it, and document it and collect it. And every scene has to be evaluated differently for the content of evidence and what's there.
When there's a victim on the scene, people also often wonder why the victim has to be out there so long, or why we don't cover them with a sheet out of respect. The best way we can respect the victim and their loved ones is by creating a strong case, which means not compromising the scene in any way.
This actually has to deal with the evidence possibly on the victim itself. When we get to the scene, sometimes the information is very limited and we don't know the whole story behind it. Whether or not there was an altercation, whether or not the victim was touched afterwards, whether or not a victim was abused. But we are not able to touch the victim. That is the medical examiner's realm. What we want to do though is have a conversation with the medical examiner and describe the evidence that we were seeing. On this crime scene here, we set up a mock crime scene bullet hole with hair-like fibers within the blood, and then a possible hand impression. That is all evidence that we want to preserve and make sure it does not get ruined, because that could lead to a potential suspect. So if we were to cover up the victim in this case, that is potential evidence that could be lost in transportation of the victim or placed within the body bag itself.
The MPD Crime Lab does have scene screens that they can use to block the public's view, but they can't always put them up immediately.
Typically and ideally, we don't want to set these up right away. We want to compromise the scene as little as possible by introducing new things to the scene. New things would be scene screens. So what we try to do is document the scene fully as much as we can, and then if we do feel like the scene needs a filter from the public, then we put those in place so that we block the view as much as possible.
No matter what the situation, crime scenes are difficult for loved ones of victims, the community, and also those working the scene.
So while we're doing our job inside the tape, we need you to do your job and stay back behind the tape and listen to the officer's instructions so that we can get our job done as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Now that you've had a chance to go behind the scenes today, we hope you have a better understanding of what really goes on, why it might take so long to process a scene, and why a body might be left outside during that entire process. From the street officer who is in charge of the perimeter, to the homicide investigators in charge of investigating the scene, and the crime lab staff who are in charge of documenting and collecting evidence, each MPD personnel has a job to do with the ultimate goal of justice being served.